Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Adam Cross. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist in Southern California. And today I'm here with Tim White, and I'm excited to get to meet Tim. And we're going to talk about some probably nerdy, but really fun stuff today. Tim, anything you want to share about yourself, introduce about yourself?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I think you are really doing good work, and I'm looking forward to getting to share a little bit of the experience with your watchers and listeners. Yeah, so my name's Tim White. I have a PsyD in clinical psychology from Divine Mercy University, and I'm currently working as a assistant professor and field placement director for St. Mary's University's new Masters of Clinical Psychology program. So we're building this new program and kind of kicking things off. So kind of making the big foray into academia. I was in clinical work before, working in an inpatient psychiatric facility for priests and religious called the St. John Vianney Center. Yeah, just excited to get to do some Catholic integration for students.
That's awesome. It's exciting because as we're talking about before we hit record here, there's a big need for this. I know DMU, this podcast is not sponsored by DMU, but I've had so many people on so far that have gone through it or just like raving about it. So it's really exciting, to hear what St. Mary's is doing too. We need more of that because as we were sharing, there can be a lot of discouragement around even just integrating your faith.
I feel like it's one of those things where people don't realize how important it is to the underlying substructure of psychology to understand how philosophy and theology relate to all of it. Because I think for me, I kind of went in thinking, I don't even know if psychology works as a field. I have all these Catholic beliefs, but I was super skeptical. I'm like, stuff's a bit wooga wooga. I don't know. I was pretty convinced that it was so empirical that it missed out on the obvious facts of human existence and stuff. And then going to DMU, I was like, no, wait a minute. It actually works. Like there's this kind of like top down, bottom up integration. So yeah, I stayed skeptical of psychology all through my grad school program. And then came out the other side thinking like, no, there's actually a lot of integration points here.
That's awesome to hear. Have you encountered that much, like even just within Catholic community, like that hesitation at times towards psychology in the field? I know in some groups there's a really strong resistance to it and a rejection of therapy. But what's your experience with that?
Definitely the case, like, and to varying degrees depending on the person, but maybe the strongest resistance is just the sense that, we have spiritual direction, we have priests, we have prayer. Why do we need a therapist to brainwash us essentially with secular ideas secretly? But I think it's more like this disconnection we have between theory and just our everyday lives. Like there's still religious orders debating, is it even possible to learn virtue through practice? Or do you have to have God instill it from the top down? And I think the answer to that is that you kind of need both, like the Catholic both and, right? Jesus didn't tell us how to forgive. He told us that it's important to forgive, but the disciples didn't think like, hey, what's the step process you need to be able to forgive somebody for the majority of people? And they didn't ask that. I think psychology helps us figure things out like that.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. Like we need that. And I mean, probably so much of that is even what we're slowing down into today. Right. You said like top down, bottom up. What I think is so critical to a Catholic approach to psychology is even just recognizing who we are, recognizing who God is, even primarily, and then recognizing who we are in light of God as his beloved sons and daughters. But to get specific, this reminder that we're body, mind, and soul. And I went to Catholic school from middle school up to college. And, there's a lot of buzzwords, I think, body, mind, soul, or, an image and likeness of God. And then part of studying psychology, I've loved just seeing how concrete that gets, right? Where we're body, mind, and soul, where what affects one affects the other, where it's almost like we cannot pretend that that's not happening. But I think a lot of people do kind of just think, oh, I can do this over here and it won't affect this over here, right? And there's kind of a disconnect.
Well, it's like
there.
we're cut off from the neck down or something. I can't tell you how many people walk into therapy and they have all this stuff going on up in their heads, very intellectual, cerebral, but then if they have an emotion, they're like, what is that? There's something going on down there. I don't know what's happening. You're an IFS therapist, right? Like you've done IFS therapy?
Informed, I haven't been trained. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. But it's like a super interesting topic to me because one of the ways that you kind of enter into that therapeutic space is by getting in touch with your body. Like you kind of do the breathing, the turn inward. But then even there's like this additional barrier to entry for some people where it's like as soon as you start getting in touch with the body, you're like doing transcendental yoga or something. And have you encountered that? Like
Big jump. Yeah.
and it's kind of scary. Like suddenly you're thinking about yourself in this different way and it gets a little bit, I don't know, like are we crossing over into the level of, are we going to encounter things within ourselves that are not of God?
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend and a colleague. He works in the Catholic Therapy Center, my group practice, but he is kind of living in that middle where he is trying to do somatic therapy with clients, but from a truly Catholic anthropology. And it's hard, especially because even a lot of people who are looking for a Catholic approach to therapy might have some scrupulosity too, where they're like, I want a Catholic therapist and here's what I'm dealing with. So then to them, they think they're like, oh, is this yoga? Like, you want me to notice my body? That must be, you want me to stretch? Like, that must be something else entirely. And so it seems hard. Like, it seems like as Catholics, we even struggle with that. Like, how do we engage with our body without it becoming something else, or just without being really afraid of it becoming something else?
I think when I was first introduced to internal family systems, I got this really weird taste in my mouth. Like they started talking about people in parts. Like you have this manager part, you have this firefighter part. I'm like, what we have like multiple souls or something? Like what's going on here? And so I was just like, I took one look at it and basically just put it on the back burner because I thought it was weird. What was your introduction to it?
I'm guessing you probably read like No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. Yeah. Honestly, I was like, this is weird. Like the second part of the book, I was like, okay, we're talking about psychedelics. Like, what is going on here? The bigger kind of worldview of IFS, I thought was like, yeah, this is out there. And I think that's pretty specific maybe to Dick Schwartz and his personal worldview. It was like, yeah, I don't jive with that. But encountering Dr. Peter Malinowski, Jerry Creets, where they were really kind of saying, hey, this is in practicality, like very useful and fruitful. And yeah, it has to be baptized. Like we have to kind of bring this into a Catholic worldview. And they've done amazing things with that. I loved Litanies of the Heart by Dr. Jerry Creet. And I think what I found is I loved how Jerry Creet focused less on, like he doesn't even, I don't remember him using even the terms like IFS, IFS, IFS. They're just more on parts work. And I'm not as familiar with ego state therapy, but I did appreciate like, oh, we could do parts work without it being this very specific kind of Dick Schwartz approach. I feel like that took some pressure off me to say like, where is this going? Or what's the spirituality behind this type thing?
That was a similar thing for me too. I knew a little bit about Carl Jung and I'd studied Freud quite a bit. And so I knew that they already had these concepts of parts. Like Freud had this idea of subpersonalities, and then Jung has this idea of archetypes. So that suddenly started to click with me. I'm like, okay, I kind of get this. So what you're saying is there's these subsystems within the system that is us. They come online at different times. And to me, that's when the barriers kind of came down and I started realizing it's this whole layer of our human experience that we're not in tune with. But super important. Like it's not the high, lofty, like theological intellect, will, passions. That's maybe the most core part of us. And it's also not just the psychological part of us that's got like emotions, cognitions, neurons firing. Like it's much more the sense that there's a middle between that where all those things interact. And suddenly it just like popped out in vivid color to me that we really need a way of talking about the different subsystems within the human experience. So that was kind of my introduction to internal family systems.
That's awesome to hear. And I think when I've used it with clients, again, it started out as kind of like, what is this? But then in practicality, it was like, I just had my clients kind of using the language already. They'd say, like, a part of me really wants this, or I notice this inner tension between this part of me and that part of me. So for anyone who's listening and, is new to IFS or parts work, that really is the fundamental understanding of it, is that there's parts of us that carry different things. And so there's typically, kind of break them down into kind of three main parts. There's protector parts, right? Or manager parts that help us do different things, right? Help you get your schoolwork done, or, who you are at work, or manage your social relationships. They protect you. They might even be critical of you at times, right? To protect you. Then there's exile parts. Exiles are parts that are exiled. We don't want them around very often. And so they're pushed to the back, and they might really be carrying our shame or our fears or our insecurities, identity beliefs. They are not those things, but they carry those things for us. And so our other parts don't want them around very often. And then the last part, which is also a protector part, really is the firefighter part. And so a firefighter part could be a very maladaptive kind of coping skill or protector part. And I kind of like the example of, if you have a small kitchen fire, right? Maybe it's just a pan on fire. A firefighter would chop down your door to put out that small kitchen fire. And so the fire's out, but now you have a giant hole in your door, right? And so they're trying to help, but they're doing some damage. And that might be kind of even some addictive habits, sinful habits that we might be stuck in, where that's pretty apparent for people.
I feel like firefighters get the bad rap for being the sinful parts. Like, they're all the ones who come with, like, it's the part of you that gets addicted. It's the part of you that goes out and blows up on somebody if you're angry, kind of gets revenge. Well, managers kind of, like, they have their ugly side too. Like, that's like the OCD side of you. It's like, everything has to be perfect. Like, oh, someone's messing with my schedule. Well, I don't have time for you today. Like,
they could be really critical and just like mean. Yeah. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, firefighters get the bad rap. They're like the most obvious active parts, but the managers they run the show, and sometimes they're the hardest to work with. And the goal with parts work is we're not trying to fire them or get rid of them. So if anybody's listening to this and there's a part activated that's like, oh, they're going to try to get rid of me, that's never the goal, right? We're trying to partner with these parts for healing, to go deeper, to ultimately help even that exile, to unburden those parts of us that are really still carrying those insecurities or identity beliefs or wounds.
To that point, one of my former supervisors liked talking about kind of internal discipleship, because there's one other part of IFS that we haven't talked about. It's not exactly a part. It's the core self, or the inmost self, whatever you want to call it. And that's the part of us that's most authentic to who we are. It's Dick Schwartz thought that it was more or less incorrupt, like this incorrupt center of our being. And we could debate whether that's actually the case or not, but I think it kind of points to, no, like, think of the best day that you've had. What were you feeling at that time? It's like, well, felt curious about what was going on around me, courageous, kind. It's like all these things that start with C or K. So anyway, like this sense of internal discipleship, it's like, well, the self is the most Christ-like part of us. It's where God dwells within us. And then, if we have a good relationship with God, our self is right up against the Trinity. But all these parts are kind of off doing their own crazy things, trying to run the show, trying to put out fires, carrying some kind of burden. And so that Christ-like part of us can kind of go about and do internal discipleship and bring all the conflicting disciple parts into unity with each other. That's the way I kind of like to think about it too.
No, that's an excellent explanation. And that's so needed. And I think even why it's called internal family systems is because you have this internal family. And so that yourself, right, your inmost being that scripture refers to, is living kind of in the grace of God, right, or close to that, and is really ministering to these parts. And so these parts can try to run the show and overwhelm us, but we also have this ability, almost like a parent, right? But a parent relying on the grace of God to say, like, let's breathe, let's figure it out together, like kind of calling everybody to a meeting, a family meeting, right? Sit around the table or sit on the couch and say, hey, like, let's pray, let's breathe. I want to hear from each of you. What do you need? What are you afraid of? And so when we do that, there's a lot of integration that can happen. And instead of one part kind of taking over to run your life, all of a sudden, all these parts are getting the time and attention they need, just like kids. And I don't know if you've run into this, but a lot of times parts really can be little kids, right? Even protector parts are sometimes really young.
Well, I even recognize that in myself. I go to park in a really tight parking lot with lots of crazy traffic going on, and suddenly, boom, there's the toddler. He's taking the wheel. Look out! And so, I think it's one of those things where if you're able to get in tune with that part in the moment, man, it can make a difference. Like if suddenly I'm like, oh, toddler part, got it, check. Okay, time to go into self mode. Like I'm going to get in touch with my inmost self. I'm going to take a minute to do some deep breathing and center on Christ. And suddenly it's not the toddler part at the wheel of the car anymore. It's Christ at the wheel of the car. But man, that's really hard to do when you're in the heat of the moment. And I see that over and over with clients too. You might have the best of intentions going into it, but it sure is difficult to keep that presence of mind and keep Christ at the center of our lives. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I've noticed that with myself. Man, maybe I've shared it with on my podcast before, but I've noticed when I'm in social situations, or sometimes like when I'm going to give a talk, I'll give a talk at a parish, and I'll just notice that like 4-year-old boy in me. Oh my gosh, like I'm afraid to talk to people. Like it's gonna be awkward. I was very shy growing up, so sometimes when I'm aware of that, spending more time with that part of me, just in therapy or journaling or prayer, I've been able to better notice him in those social situations. So now I'm at a point where I can really say, oh, I see you. Like, I got you. And I'll just kind of imagine scooping him up. Like I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So in a very similar way, it's like, I know how to pick up a kid who's afraid, And so like, I'm just going to scoop that kid up, and I might still be talking, but just that closeness of like, hey, I'm here with you, God's here with you. And that's been really transformative for me, where I'm just even physically just more relaxed. I'm like, I've got you. I'm not expecting this conversation to soothe that 4-year-old. It's like, I am, with the grace of God, tending to him. And it's been just really, beautiful to just relax, to rest in that.
And I think there's some really interesting research that has come out of what they call polyvagal theory about this exact thing. So if you haven't heard of polyvagal theory before, it's maybe what you've commonly known about fight, flight, or freeze. It's the sense that we can go into upregulated screaming toddler mode. So that'd be fight or flight. Or you can go into kind of freeze mode, where you're so overwhelmed by whatever threat is posing itself that you just shut down. So it's kind of where we get this top-down, bottom-up integration piece again. Our nervous systems govern that. So there's the autonomic nervous system that can either send us into that kind of heightened state or send us into this low state. One of the really cool things about internal family systems is that it helps you get back in the balance state between the two extremes. Drawing on our Catholic faith philosophical tradition, it's the golden mean between two extremes of vice. We're aiming for that middle path. And that system is actually called the social engagement system. So instead of being fight or flight or freeze, it's rest and digest, feed and breed. So it's those moments when like you're having a really good meal with your friends. So you're in a bit more of a downregulated state. There's some flexibility you can kind of lower down. Or say you're watching a really exciting movie, that's more of an upregulated version, which can be super pleasurable as well. So IFS is meant to bring us back to that centered social engagement system and keep us co-regulated with the people around us.
When we're regulated, we're able to connect with others and engage in pleasurable activities like enjoying a good meal or enjoying a good movie, not being in that fight or flight mode or shut down mode.
It's almost like if we're around people that are regulated, it regulates us. Like how often in traffic or somewhere in public, you see someone that's very dysregulated, you suddenly feel that like, you start getting ready to engage with them. Even if you kind of turn the other way and avoid the situation, your heart is racing, your lungs are pumping, your pupils dilate, like all those things that biologically prepare us to go into.
No, I totally relate to that. Being around people who you can tell are tensed up and you immediately kind of go into like that defense yourself, right? You're like, ooh, I don't know what to expect here. I don't know what's going to be needed of me. I think we see that a lot in terms of kind of attachment, attachments with children, right? We put all the labels to that, like the dynamics with parents, patterns, but we also are doing that every day, right? With the people immediately around us, right? That interaction. But I know we're talking about autonomic nervous system and we're talking about parts work, and they can feel like two different worlds, right? One is like very physiological and the other one can feel like kind of abstract. Like, what is this? I don't know, this part of me. Like, what are you talking about? So how do you see that intersection of what seems so abstract and what seems so biological?
Well, I'll describe a situation. So let's say you're trying to navigate a busy street and there's buses, cars, angry drivers, and your autonomic nervous system automatically goes into flight mode. It could go into fight mode, could go into freeze mode, but let's say it goes into flight mode. You want to get out of the situation. So immediately you have this physiological reaction to the environment. Your heart starts pumping faster, your pupils dilate, it's preparing you to move. And then simultaneously, all the other parts of you come online as well. Your memories, your intellect, your will, your emotions. Let's say that all those things are clustered. You can look at them individually and say, oh, I just had the emotion of fear or feeling trapped. Let's say you're having that reaction, but simultaneously there's this other part of yourself that wants to just get control of the situation. And that has a separate level of emotions, thoughts, behaviors, memories. In the moment, there's these two conflicting parts of yourself. One is like, no, I need to be an adult in the situation and take charge of what's going on. The other party just wants to run out of the room. So already we have two parts going on there. And your nervous system is going haywire because the two parts are trying to get control of the situation. And so you're bouncing between getting flushed in the face and kind of this icy, like, I'm in charge. And pretty soon you find yourself getting a little bit overstimulated. And so then, like, what do you do? And this could happen. Like, it could happen anywhere. We've all had these moments of panic. And that's the moment when you want to go to your spiritual attachment figure. You want to go to that place of inner peace where you exist with Christ. So you can think about someone that either reminds you of Christ, or you can think about Christ himself if that's helpful to you. But you want to get in touch with someone that's always been a protector to you, someone that's never really officially let you down in any major capacity. I actually tried this when my wife was going through childbirth. It's like, let's find a spiritual figure that you really connect to. And I want you to just do some deep breathing and think about Mary's face. And you know what? It works. Like, if you get in touch with loved ones during traumatic moments, it can actually preserve you against trauma. In fact, it doesn't necessarily matter how traumatic the situation has been. There's some research that if you're able to get immediately resourced with a secure attachment figure, that traumatic event can become a source of resilience instead of a source of trauma. And we don't even know about this. Like, it's not even something that we're commonly aware of. But think of the difference between a child that just got knocked over by someone on a bicycle, it just kind of upset, crying on the ground, versus a child that is immediately scooped up by his father. Completely different scenarios. Obviously, we don't always have the person that's going to be there to pick us up in the moment. And that's one of the reasons why having a good relationship with God can be incredibly helpful as well. So I'm in the midst of that traffic and everything's overwhelming. Quick prayer, think about the face of Christ, use some imagination, and boom, you're regulated again.
I hope that's what people take away from this podcast, because that was like it in a nutshell. And I'm jealous of your students because that I could tell you're going to be a great professor teaching this. That's it, right? Body, mind, and soul. Like you just described that, yeah, where one meets the other. And what's happening in our bodies is then, in our senses, what we're taking in from our experiences in the world is then triggering that. Like you said, a cluster, we could start with that and say that is bringing up all these memories, emotions, relationships, feelings that we have been through this part of us that is then coming online, right? And it could be multiple parts of us, and they want to do different things to make sure we're okay because we want to be safe. And then having someone to co-regulate with, like, that makes so much sense. We are relational beings. We're made for relationship. We're made for God. And so being able to connect with God directly, or Mary, or the saints, or people in our lives who God is working through to help us regulate, to help us to reach that safety and that calm. I mean, that's huge, right? And so kind of hearing like 3 ways to even regulate there, right? We can invite God in. We can picture the face of Christ or Mary, and we can regulate with the Lord. We can breathe. We can remember, I'm okay, right? Be still and know that I am God. For some people, that might be hard. Some people, they might see the face of Christ and it brings up shame or guilt, or same thing with Mary. So sometimes it's that person that they feel safe with. God is working through someone in their life, a grandma, a best friend. Hey, I feel safe with you. I can breathe. And then with parts work too, we're cultivating that sense of self, right? Like you said, it's kind of this discipleship where we're being sent out to ourselves first, to those parts of us where we are now taking the love of God to those parts of us that are afraid, right? And caring for them. So it's God, others, and then this inmost self, I think, is huge. And I do like the imagery. I don't know where I heard it from. There's so much content, but kind of the stained glass imagery, right? Where it's like the love of God, the grace of the Lord is just pouring through the stained glass. And we're really called to be that stained glass and have it shine on those parts of us that really need the illumination of Christ to heal, for us to know kind of what's in there, what's in our interior life, to bring it to the Lord. So we get to partake in that.
Because on one hand, you can be thrown into a state of dysregulated parts by a situation like I described, or you can choose to go there voluntarily. You can use therapy or spiritual direction as a way of getting in touch with the wounded parts of yourself, and then you go and heal that part. So you can do the work ahead of time before you get dysregulated. Think of Jordan Peterson, Bishop Robert Barron, any of the big names right now will talk about the hero's journey. And it's like, that's what you do when you go to therapy. You're going into a hero's journey, and it's an inner journey where you're going to heal the parts of yourself that have succumbed to the malevolence of life and bring those back into a redeemed state. So it's like you can have, as Carl Jung was talking about, this shadow self and then this kind of more redeemed self. And so it's like, well, why not be in self all the time? Why not help your parts come into communion with the other parts of yourself so that the most Christ-like part of yourself is leading all the time? Every part has a good role to play. It's like, if that part's causing a lot of dysfunction, let's say it's the addicted part, and you could say, well, I can try to cut that part of myself off and say, addiction has no place in my life, and I'm completely cutting it off. But you're doing violence to that part and not admitting that maybe that part has something to tell you as well. Maybe the fallen part of that part is addiction, but maybe the redeemed part of it is intense focus or something. Who knows what role it could actually play in your life to make you a better person. So that's why I love imaginative prayer. Just use all 5 senses. Get Christ right there in front of your face. Feel the emotion. Notice what parts are coming up and allow him to speak to the addiction, like straight to the addiction. Or if it's your family friend that was always a mentor to you, it's like, well, what would he say to this part? How different would I feel if my mentor walked in the room right now? Like, you can just notice the body just kind of coming down, the body regulating. So I don't know. I just kind of brain dumped there.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm hearing a lot of just even bringing the face of Christ into our focus. And man, I mean, that's just even kind of a good reflection. Like, for anyone to do is like it's powerful, right? To imagine, okay, Christ is just gazing and looking at you with love. It's very Ignatian. And what is your reaction? What is your response to that? What does that bring up in you? That alone could be a lot, right? That's beginning that hero's journey, to say, I feel ashamed. I feel he's disappointed in me, or I feel loved. And here's why. So much good stuff there. And yeah, I love that we can really invite Christ to work with these parts. And it is an investment. I think a lot of people might ask, like, well, why would I want to go there? That's stressful. But even what you said about an addiction, like an addicted part of us, sometimes or a lot of times people can exile that firefighter, that addicted part, say this part is the worst, I hate it, and I'm going to exile it. And maybe they're good at it, right? So there's symptom reduction, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm not doing this discerning behavior, but then exiled parts usually fight for a way back. And so that addiction could rear its ugly head in a moment of stress or trauma in our life. And so what we're really talking about here is saying, let's actually kind of go into the breach, right? Like go into the battle with God, not on our own, before things get really bad, hopefully. And let's actually look at this with the help of Christ and heal so that parts can pop up again, but we're aware of it. We're kind of facing that head on. And that sounds like what you're saying is a challenge for every single person, but especially every single Christian to go into that.
Oh, definitely. And just the importance of having a guide or a mentor to accompany you there too. A good therapist, a good friend, whatever it is. Have you read the Divine Comedy before? It's a good one. There's some dry parts of it, but it's interesting because Dante, he's the author, but he goes on this journey into hell. It's like, we're just going to throw you right into hell. Just start off the bar. We're just going for it. But he chooses Homer as his guide, like the great poet Homer. And so Homer is able to take him down into the depths of hell. He's seeing all the suffering souls down there. And, as therapists, we might think of that as parts, like all these wounded parts of ourselves. But because Homer's there, he's able to kind of stay above the fray and observe that. And it's kind of the same thing in therapy. Like if you go into hell with a good therapist or a spiritual director, they can keep you above the fray and you can examine the parts of yourself that are mired in sin or in trauma or injury, And then the cool thing is that he gets to come out the other side and he goes through this purgative process that allows him to overcome the parts of himself that are dysfunctional and then kind of ascend to virtue, into this balanced sense of social engagement with others. That's why I'll talk about Dante a lot, because I think that's a great example. It's like, if you haven't read it, it's just like, he didn't intend it, but a great kind of view of the therapeutic journey, in my opinion.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was kind of reminded of actually two things I've heard from Chris Stefanik. I remember one time, it might have even been like a confirmation video, because I used to be a youth minister and help with confirmation, but he said something like, your mind's like a bad neighborhood, don't go in it alone, right? So what you were saying there is like having a guide, having someone to help you stay calm and regulated. But then the other thing he said to a conference of bishops and priests was that we have to preach the gospel to ourselves first, each and every day. And so what parts of you are not getting the gospel daily? What parts of you are you, in some ways, neglecting, right? Exiling, abandoning, because it feels too scary, or it feels too far gone, or we don't know how to work with that part or even look at that part. So how do we preach the gospel to those parts of us, again, that are usually like little kids, right? Feel young, feel emotional, feel out of control. How do we bring the gospel to that level? I think that's a great place to start with kind of what we're talking about.
It's one thing to talk about this in therapeutic terms and kind of the theory behind it, but maybe one big takeaway here is that this is work that has a ripple effect in your own life. Like, it's not just this imaginative journey you go on in therapy. It will start affecting the way you relate to people. You'll feel more confident socially. You'll feel more regulated when you're by yourself in stressful moments. You'll deepen your relationship with God and the people around you. In moments when you might find yourself withdrawing or becoming isolated, you'll be able to stay in that place more easily. And your emotions won't scare you as much. It'll be, when you start going into toddler mode, it'll be, oh, hello, familiar friend. You can greet yourself in a different way. So the whole issue that people struggle with self-esteem, it's like, no, I don't have to have low self-esteem. Like, I am a good person. God created me that way. And when parts of myself show up that do have low self-esteem, I can greet those with warmth. And then who knows where it goes from there. Once you're starting to do this work within yourself, then it branches out in all the other systems you're a part of. It ripples out into your life. And not only in the present, but into the future. If you're breaking one pattern within yourself, that's going to have a ripple effect for who knows how many generations into your family. Like, who knows? Who knows how good it could get? We could be so much more influential than we even realize. Like, I really believe that. Like, we're such complex creatures. Like, who knows how good life could get if we're all doing this inner work? Even if we're just with one pattern, just like find one pattern of interaction where you don't feel confident and break it. And suddenly that opens up whole new possibilities in your life that you never even dreamed were possible.
What I'm hearing from you is if we change our relationship with ourselves, like how we relate to ourselves with God, then we end up changing all our relationships, right? In our families. Like we end up really knowing how to love ourselves and love other people. And that's the gospel, right? That's the greatest commandment, right? To love God, love others as we love ourselves. We're examining, well, how do I love myself? What does that look like? How is God calling me to do that? So that's huge.
Therapy is expensive, and you look at it and you might say, like, oh, I'm not worth that much. But you would do it for a family member, though. We treat ourselves like dirt. And a lot of times we would treat the people in our lives better than that. It's okay. Like, investing in yourself is investing in the people around you, too. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the people around you to address whatever's going on in your life. Like, your relationships are worth investing in. And it's one of those things that just compounds in interest the more you invest in it. And, you know, bias as a therapist, of course, but it's like, how many times do you see the pattern unfold before it's like, no, therapy's worth it? And even if you only go for like 6 months, I think it's something like 75% of people experience major improvement if they're in therapy for just 6 months. It's like, well, that's worth knowing.
And you think about it too, like, okay, how much does it cost to get a haircut every month, or, you know, to have a personal trainer, or whatever it might be that we're spending our money on. And what we're talking about here is transforming your mental, emotional, physical well-being and bettering the relationships around you. And from a Catholic perspective, all while really inviting God into it at its core, at the center, right? That's not like some other aspect. Like that's at the core of all of it. You know, I mean, that's such an investment. But I've always joked with people too. I'm like, if you wouldn't say it to your grandma or a 4-year-old, why are you saying it to yourself? Right? Like, because you're right. People can treat themselves like dirt, and they say things to themselves that they would never say to another human being. But why is it okay to treat yourself like that? Right? So even that's perspective is like, oh, okay. Like that's something I can work on. Right. But as we're wrapping up here, I'm curious because I think we're given a lot of good practicals here. Anything that you recommend for even regulating or, you know, or getting in touch with the parts? I know there's therapy, spiritual direction, but even stuff people could do today to help with that. Any places to start?
I mean, we talked about therapy already, but let's say you're already going to therapy. A really good place to start is to just begin getting in tune with your own body. The body is the trailhead to all these things. It's not just in your head. If you have a distressing thought, some part of your body is reacting to that distressing thought. It's like, oh, I get this heat in my chest when I think about whatever. So get curious about that. Like, pretend that heat in your chest is telling you something. And then sit down and get super curious. Just like you're sitting down with a coffee with yourself. Like, get to know that it's probably a part of yourself that you've been ignoring for a while. So like, get to know it. Do some deep breathing. What's the thing that gets you regulated historically? And just sit in that space. You know, maybe being with a particular friend tends to get you in that happy place. You know, they co-regulate you. And that's a great place to start. As soon as you surround yourself with regulated people, get a good guide, do deep breathing, use imaginative prayer to get in touch with the face of Christ. All those things are going to get you back into a down-regulated social engagement state.
Yeah, we don't have to be upregulated. We don't have to be stressed Like that's not the goal of Christianity, is like always be stressed, never relax, right? That's kind of a scrupulous mindset. It's like Christ is the Prince of Peace, and he's not made you to live in chronic stress. Life is hard without living in chronic stress. Like we operate stress and carry our crosses better when we're regulating, when we're calming ourselves. So the goal isn't to be like, no, I'm a soldier, I have to always go. It's like, you will, but don't do it alone. Be present, be with the Lord, right? We can operate from that place of peace. I think that's huge. And one thing I'll add too is, you know, Christ tells us in scripture, like to become like children again, right? To be in the kingdom of God, right? To enter into heaven, we have to become like children. And so don't be afraid to use your imagination. I know it could sound weird for people to be like, I'm going to talk to that heat in my chest. It's like, no, please. Like, yeah, be like a child and say, why is this here? Right? Again, curiosity, no judgment. Why is this here? What is it trying to tell me? Right? I can't stop tapping my foot. What is my foot trying to tell me? Like, what is there? And I think people will be surprised at how quickly they know the answer. Oh, I'm anxious about this test tomorrow. Ah, yeah. Okay. So why am I anxious? What am I afraid is going to happen? What is that part telling me? It's so practical, right? It's so real and relational because we're relational. I think that's why I love it. I love nerding out and talking about this, and it's fun. It's exciting because it's real. It's helpful.
I think Pope Leo really does a good job of this too. That guy's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I think it seems to me that he's pretty good about that calm, Christ-like presence. Like I look at him and I think, wow, he looks really calm. And I know that's not calm being Pope. And at the same time, I also think that he's got this sense of like, I think he's up to things. Like he seems busy, you know? So he's got this balance between that upregulated state and the downregulated state. He's engaged, probably in self a lot of the time, focused on Christ. So yeah, look to great examples that can show you what that looks like, especially if you've never had that demonstrated in your life.
That's really cool to think of. And even Jesus's perfect regulation, right? Integration parts. Like, so if he was angry, man, it was intentional.
Yeah,
it
was
from
intentionally allowing that part to show. That was a self-led part.
Exactly. Self-led anger. Oof. That's a great podcast. We should come back to that. But Tim, thank you so much for being here, having this conversation, and any place people can get a hold of you if they have any questions.
So I'm in a couple of different places. If you're familiar with the Catholic Psychotherapy Association, you can find me on the directory there. I'm also on our new Masters of Psychology program page. If you go to St. Mary's University of Minnesota, to the Masters of Clinical Psychology, Masters of Science in Clinical Psychology page, we're there as well.
Well, thank you so much. And for anyone watching and listening, thank you for tuning in. Feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any comments or video suggestions or topic ideas, I always love to hear what people are interested in. And again, I love just having these conversations.
It was a real blessing today.
Okay. Well, God bless, and we'll see you all next time.